Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by the UCLA Nazarian Center for Israel Studies and co-sponsored by UCLA's Department of Political Science. I'm Dov Waxman, the director of the Nazarian Center and the Rosalind and Arthur Gilbert Foundation Chair of Israel Studies at UCLA. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Tzipi Livni. She is an Israeli stateswoman who is widely regarded as the most influential woman in Israel since Golda Meir. She was Israel's vice prime minister and foreign minister from 2006 to 2009. She has also served as Israel's Minister of Justice, Minister of Regional Cooperation, Minister of Immigrant Absorption, Minister of Housing and Construction, Minister of Agriculture, and as leader of the opposition. She has played a pivotal role in Israeli national security and in peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians, having been Israel's chief negotiator during the last rounds of peace talks that were held in 2008 and 2013. Given Ms. Livni's deep experience in Israeli politics, in policy making, and in national security, it is particularly relevant to hear her perspective today, as Israel is in the midst of a war that follows the worst attack on Israeli civilians in the country's history on the 7th of October. Ms. Livni will talk about Israel in the Middle East after the October 7th massacre. After her presentation, she'll have plenty of time for Q&A, so please send us your questions. And now, without further ado, let me turn over to Ms. Livni and thank her for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for having me, because I believe that these are truly difficult times. Huge challenges ahead to Israel and to world Jewry. In a way, I think that we are fighting the same war in different fronts. One is for Israel's security, and the other is against anti-Semitism that is rising in different parts of the world. And it is true that I'm going to speak about the days after October 7th, but in many ways we are still in October 7th. We are still in a trauma. October 7th is not even close to other events or terror events that we passed since the establishment of the State of Israel. I mean, I was born in Israel. In a way, like any other Israeli, I don't want to say we are used to, but yes, to terror attacks, to wars. We take in consideration that this can hit you, but yet not these kind of atrocities, horrors. It's not only about the number of Israelis that they've killed, but also the cruelty. And frankly, I didn't think that I would face this kind of horrors, this kind of cruelty that one human being can do to another. Kidnapping women and children. I have a grandson who's 13 months old, and when I look at him, I still thinking about Kfir Bivas, the young baby that Hamas have kidnapped. So it's clear that these are crimes against humanity. They picture themselves, they film themselves, like while doing so, call their parents to say that they've killed Jews. So in a world, I think that it would be the obvious that Israel should get the support to act against this horrific terror. And the goal of elimination of Hamas should be completely accepted and supported by the entire international community. But yet, on one hand, we have terrorists that their ideology, as written in their own charter, the charter of Hamas, is not only to kill Israelis, but to kill all the infidels, Jews or others. So clearly they are supporting genocide, while unfortunately Israel is the country that needs to defend itself in the ICJ, in the International Court of Justice, for doing genocide to the others. I hear young people that think that they represent moral values, chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and between the river to the sea. if they are calling for the existence of Palestine, it's on the expense of the existence of the state of Israel. We see anti-Semitism, as I said before, and I can also share that those leaders that saw the atrocities in some of the videos, they knew what happened and stood with Israel since day one. Leaders like President Biden and others, they are now under attacks for supporting Israel. So let's speak in the next, during this webinar about the why this is happening, what are the answers, and how can we create a better reality for the future. So the why, I think that you living here know better even than me what is happening in the United States. There is one thing that I would never ask, and this is why Hamas did it, because there is no just cause for these atrocities. And those are trying to understand it, that this is part of the conflict or the occupation. I'll speak about this as well. But we can see those young people that are trying or thinking that this is part of the ongoing conflict. They don't understand, one, that October 7th is not just another terror attack, as I said before. Secondly, they don't understand that what Hamas did is not connected to the occupation, that Hamas does not represent any legitimate cause of the Palestinians for a state. I do believe in the idea or the vision of two states for two peoples as a mean to keep Israel as a Jewish democratic state. And there was no occupation in Gaza. So we need to go back a bit to some historical facts. In 2005, Israel decided on the disengagement plan. I was in the Israeli cabinet at the time. I supported it. We wanted to give the Palestinians an opportunity to flourish, to build greenhouses, new buildings, new economy. And therefore, in October 6th, there was no one Israeli soldier, one Israeli settler in Gaza Strip. So I know that you would hear, yes, but it's still occupation because it's an open air prison, because there's a siege. So I need that we should ask why there's a siege. I mean, Israel left Gaza Strip because we don't want to control the people of Gaza. We don't want to be there. We didn't want, and we don't want to do it now. But what happened after we left Gaza Strip is that Hamas was elected. He killed the political activists of the other party. And then the entire international community that included at the time the UN, the EU, the US, and Russia. Maybe it was the last moment in which the US and Russia worked together, doing the right thing, saying that if Hamas wants to get legitimacy and Gaza, and they can open Gaza to the world, seaport, airport, everything, if they would just accept and abide to three requirements. One is to recognize the right of Israel to exist. The other is to accept the formal peace treaties between Israel and the Palestinians, mainly Oslo Agreement. And the most important one, to renounce violence and terrorism. But since 2005, Hamas is not willing to do so. So those that are saying, you know, you are familiar with the sentence that one side freedom fighter is the other side terrorist and vice versa, this is not the case. Because the only way to free Gaza since 2005 was to stop violence and terrorism. So they doesn't want to do it, they didn't want to do it. They already said that if they will remain and stay in Gaza, they will repeat and repeat again and again these kind of massacres. And the facts prove that the siege was needed because they used all the money that they get, not to use it in favor or for better life to their own people, but to build this underground, this city underneath Gaza with all these tunnels, with all this money, and with all the weapons. So for those saying there is no food in Gaza, but let's admit there are still rockets and missiles in Gaza. So what we are seeing after this horrific day is that, in a way, those that are, say, adapting or supporting or even understanding what Hamas did, they support crimes against humanity. And this is something that we need to reiterate, to show, to speak about, because I don't believe that some of those that would saying, like the Secretary General of the United Nations, who said that it's the occupation or something like this. So I know, and I'm not asking the world to turn a blind eye also to the war in Gaza and to what the Israeli IDF is doing in Gaza. The war was needed. I was there since 2005 in the Israeli cabinet. Hamas attacked Israeli civilians. We had one operation in 2008. We stopped when we felt that we achieved deterrence, but yet it's Hamas, it's their ideology, it's their jihadist ideology, so there is no deterrence when it comes to them. Later in 2014, they continued to attack Israeli civilians. We had another military operation that ended with kind of understandings that this brings us also to the money that they got from and through Qatar. And they were those in Israel believing that, okay, now they can put their interest and use this money for better life for Palestinians, but this is not Hamas as we know it now, better than ever, unfortunately, with a huge price. So as I said, I'm not asking the world to turn a blind eye to the war, but I would ask them to judge it in accordance to legal and moral values. And there is one thing that I cannot accept, and this is the wrong equivalence, because there is no equivalence between a democratic country that is trying to give security to its own people, acting in accordance to the international law, when Israelis are acting against the international law, which is also the Israeli law, they are being judged, and some of them also, while we are speaking, in jail. While on the other side, they completely feel free to do whatever they want. They target civilians deliberately. I mean, they speaking about beheading, about burning people alive. And there is no equivalence in any democracy between somebody who killed somebody by mistake and a murderer that entered and killed others deliberately. And therefore, this wrong equivalence leads to a complete unjust situation. And it's not only about Israel, because these are the challenges that the entire free world is facing. We are facing now Hamas, but the US faced also other terrorist organizations, jihadists, the same. Less important for me whether it's Sunni or Shia, as long as they express this jihadist ideology. And therefore, there is also another important thing to understand here, and this is, I'm saying as somebody who was the chief negotiator for peace between Israel and the Palestinians in the last 2 rounds of negotiations. There is no hope for peace with Hamas. Those of us here in this webinar, outside, supporting or saying that they support peace between Israel and the Palestinians, that they support the vision of 2 states for 2 peoples, Hamas is against it. Hamas is not willing to end the conflict. As I said before, since 2005, Hamas is not willing to say that Israel has the right to exist. It's a religious conflict, and religious conflicts are unsolvable because it's not about a legitimate aspiration. It's about depriving us or others from their right to express their own faith in a different manner. So in a way, it's not even, you don't need to choose between Israel or the Palestinians, but if you support peace, you should support also the war in Gaza. So it's not about revenge. It's not about being emotional. I mean, we are emotional, but this is not the reason for this war. The most legitimate, necessary goal now is to eliminate Hamas as a terrorist organization and also as a regime in Gaza Strip. In order to do so, we need at first to understand what does it mean to be a terrorist organization and a regime. And I do not accept also another thing, and this is the idea that you can be a terrorist organization with a political arm, and the world would give legitimacy to your political arm, because at the end of the day, you know, one hand is acting in terror attacks, the other is a political, it's the same body, it's the same vicious mind. And I tried to prevent their participation in the elections in 2005. And I went to the American administration at the time. I was Minister of Justice. And I said, listen, in order to participate in elections, all these terrorist organizations, either Hamas or Hezbollah in the north or other parts, they need to accept the rule of law, the idea that the monopoly of use of force is by governments and not by armed militias. Even in Israel, in the past, our Supreme Court denied the right of a racist party to participate in elections. The answer that I got at the time, embarrassing to say, was one, they will not win the elections. Well, they won. And the other is, look at Hezbollah in Lebanon, they are now more moderate because they are also turned into the political arena. And just a few months later, Hezbollah started an attack on Israeli soil, so no moderation and nothing. When this is their ideology, they are using, abusing, exploiting democracy, and they need to choose before elections between bullets or ballots. And I believe that it's not too late to put it on the table as an international agenda, because the elections on the Palestinian side were supervised by NDI, so we have a say whether the elections were free and fair when a terrorist organization is participating in the elections. So speaking about these legitimate goals, one is to act militarily. And I'm sure that I'll be asked also about the civil casualties, but I want to make it clear. Israel is acting in accordance to the international law. I was Minister of Justice in other military operations. The targets are being supervised by the Attorney General. This is not a collective punishment. Regardless to what some Israeli ministers are saying, this is not the Israeli government policy, and it's not what the IDF is doing. And what we try to do is to send this warning to the people in the north, saying to them, if you want to save your life, because we need to act against terror, and is hiding amongst you, so you should leave the place. And Hamas, who truly doesn't care about their life, told them to stay, ordered them to stay. So it created a very complicated situation that we are trying to act against terror while avoiding or minimizing the damage to civilians. As I said before, when it comes to the pain of loss of life, it's the same on both sides, but as I said also before, you cannot judge it in the same manner. Now the real question is what is the definition of victory when it comes to a war between a democracy and terrorist organization? Because what we are looking for, as we used to have during the times that we had wars between countries, we were under attacks by countries. It's completely different when it comes to a terrorist organization because, well, we are looking for victory, they are looking for survival. So at the end of the day, a terrorist can get out of a tunnel and say, I won, we won. And therefore, the definition of what is the moment where we say that we harm them enough so they cannot harm Israelis anymore. But this is not enough because we need to, we cannot find them as a regime. We shouldn't. So what is the best way to change a regime? To replace them. And this brings Israel to a crossroad of decisions that are connected to the internal division within Israel. And we need to speak about this as well. Because who's going to control Gaza, take care of the Palestinian life there, reconstruct Gaza after the war? What happens in places where Israel is living and Hamas is coming back? And if we would publish an ad, who wants to be the next regime in Gaza? Well, Israel shouldn't and doesn't want to. We need to take care of our security, but we don't want to reoccupy Gaza. Well, maybe there is a minority in Israel that wants to, but this is not the Israeli interest. Egypt, they are still happy that in the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt, Begin was willing to get Gaza instead of giving it. Well, no, the Americans, Europeans, nobody. And the Egyptians don't want even, as I said before, to think about that or to give the people in Gaza a way out to Egypt. So what is left is a Palestinian regime because they are Palestinians. And the only regime that exists now is the Palestinian Authority. Now I have a list of things why to criticize them. And frankly, as I said before, I negotiated peace with them and they failed to make the right decision. In 2014, there was a framework for negotiation based on 67 line, demilitarized Palestinian state, quite similar to what Clinton offered them and Olmert offered them, and again and again and again. Also this time, Abu Mazen didn't give an answer to this offer. And yes, they are paying the families of the terrorists, but yet they are cooperating with Israel on Israel's security in the West Bank. And I can assure you that during the negotiations, they accept in general, we didn't finalize the borders and so on, and there are other sensitive issues, but the idea of two states is something that they accept, or the right of Israel to exist. So they need to reform, but yet this is the only option for the future. But yet the Israeli cabinet cannot until now make this decision because of the internal debate. So let's put Gaza for a few minutes aside and speak about Israel and the internal debate. And it's very deep. I believe in a national GPS of Israel as a nation state for the Jewish people with equal rights to all its citizens. In other words, a secure Jewish democratic state. In order to keep these values living in harmony of being a Jewish and democratic state, we need to have a Jewish majority. And I hope to find, when I'm driving to this destination, a partner on the other side that would be willing to make the compromises that are needed also on the Palestinian side. And therefore, I hope that I can find a station where I stop and reach an agreement with. This didn't happen, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. But yet, I'm not changing my destination. If there is a problem, well, traffic jams. So I'm waiting for a while. I'm trying to find other roads to the same destination. But I know what is my vision, and this is the vision that is written in the Declaration of Independence. But yet, we have also in Israel another destination, ideology that I understand. I'm completely against it, but it's not about this Jewish democratic state, it's about greater Israel. And therefore, those that are pushing us for the greater Israel, they are dreaming now about reoccupying Gaza, rebuilding settlements. And what we saw also last year was their attempts to weaken Israel's democracy, because their major goal is about the land and the Jewishness of the state, and not about being a democracy. And this is a moment in which the Israeli government needs to decide. And those who understand that at the end of the day, we want to separate from the Palestinians in a way to get divorce and to split the property. So the Palestinian Authority or any Palestinian regime is better than Hamas, as long as it's not a terrorist regime, does not support her, and in the future maybe will be also capable to do so. But since within the Israeli government we have different voices, they are stuck. And therefore, we don't have a real decision on the day after, which is not at the end of the war, it's here and now. And I believe that from this horrible situation, we can change it into an opportunity. And I think that the role of leadership is to try to take difficult situations and to turn it into opportunities. And what is the opportunity? As you know, before October 7th, the Saudis were willing to normalize their relations with Israel with some connection to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now we can put all these components and create this opportunity. It's complicated, and we need the United States to orchestrate it. And it's different deals between different players. One is US and Saudi. The Saudis want what they ask to get from the US, as long as the US is willing to give them that. So this is what the Saudis are getting from the US. The Saudis would normalize their relations with Israel, and this is what they will give to Israel. The reward that they are asking from Israel is to readapt the idea of two states for two peoples and to take steps forward. I'm not familiar with the exact parameters that they put on the table. The Egyptians need to contribute in keeping the border between Egypt and Gaza Strip, the south border. And Israel needs also to get an understanding and legitimacy to act against terror, to continue and act against terror also within Gaza Strip as needed, as we are doing now in a way not completely similar in Area B in the West Bank. So the new regime, the Palestinian regime that will be there, needs to agree to cooperate. The entire international community would agree that the goal for Gaza is demilitarization, That was already agreed in the negotiations that I've held with the Palestinians before. And there are also other players in the region that can contribute. For example, the Emirates, that their policy is about de-radicalization and moderation in the region. They can take over or contribute to the education on the Palestinian side. I think that the role, while it was discovered, the role of UNRWA, there's a need to change it. This also can be an opportunity to begin to deal with the issue of the Palestinian refugees that are being kept as cards for so many years, and keeping it for and generation after generation for 4 or 5 generations now. And this is something that will be agreed upon now, but yet it will take time to implement. The implementation should be in stages when everybody agrees how to do it. There are also some international organizations or the United Nations or others that need to contribute also to the reconstruction. So it's very complicated, but if we would not seize the moment, this can lead to a situation that this war in Gaza, that I completely support, can turn into just another round as we used to have before, and we cannot afford Hamas to stay there. We cannot. And it's also in a way limited in time due to the elections in the United States. But I hope that we can turn this horrific situation into a new opportunity that will take time. I never spoke about peace like, it will happen one day and we will live happily ever after. No. But the choice in the Middle East is between bad options. And the role of leadership is to understand that, to explain it to the people, and to make the right decision. I'll finish just by saying also something about the Israeli society these days, because what happened also, I went through different feelings since October 7, shock, understanding of the horror, sadness. The hostages are still there, and there's a need to bring them back home, and the choice should not be between eliminating Hamas and bringing them home, because this is part, while eliminating Hamas, it's about Israel's security, but also releasing and bringing the hostages is part of Israel's strength. It's about the Israeli society, it's the solidarity of the Israeli society. This is a situation that we cannot, live with as a matter of fact, that these people that were kidnapped from their home will stay in captivity of Hamas. I know that while we are speaking now, there is a serious attempt to release a group of these refugees in return to a period not too long of ceasefire for this reason. I hope that it will turn into reality before Ramadan enters, because usually Ramadan is a very explosive month. And speaking about solidarity, it was emerged, it was shown right after these events, helping each other, being united. And it is touching, and it is very important. And not only unity amongst the Israelis, but also between Israel and the world Jewry. And we are grateful for that. But yet, unity is not a replacement for decision-making. And since I've shared with you what is the deep division in Israel between the two different political parts in Israel, I think that we need to deal with this. But I hope that after October 7, the discussion, the internal discussion in Israel will be different, and it will be about substance. It will be based on an understanding that the other is not the enemy, can be a political rival. But yet, in the era of social networks and populism, maybe just a hope, but maybe we can turn this not only to an opportunity in our region and to have a new security structure, but also a different dialogue within Israel. And also a new dialogue between Israel and the world Jewry about the substance. What does it mean to be a Jewish democratic state? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've had a lot of questions, and I will try and paraphrase and put some of these questions to you. I want to kind of start with October the 7th, then talk about the war, and then build out from that about the future and the current negotiations and diplomacy. So first of all, on the October 7th massacre, and as you said quite clearly, obviously Hamas bears responsibility for the massacre and the shocking atrocities that were committed on October the 7th. But there's also been a lot of criticism made about the security failures that contributed to the October the 7th massacre. Whether it was the decision, alleged decision of Prime Minister Netanyahu to, essentially empower or allow Hamas to remain in place as a way of weakening the Palestinian Authority, right up until the weeks before the October 7th attack, where Israeli IDF troops were moved into the West Bank, and the border communities in Israel were very lightly defended. How do you see the responsibility of the Israeli government and the security establishment for what happened on October the 7th? I mean, I know we're still very far from any hearings and investigation, but it seems to many that this represents a monumental failure for the security establishment as a whole, that the border was so lightly defended, that intelligence warnings weren't acted upon. You've been inside that security establishment. So what's your view on the kind of criticisms that have been made about its?
Well, first, it is monumental failure. I mean, nobody can ignore it. From two different aspects. One is the intelligence, and the other is the operational failure on the same day. And it's quite difficult to understand, but it happened. It happened to us with this horrific price that Israeli civilians pay. And therefore, of course, there's responsibility. Even without, there is no need for, for committees and to inquire. Maybe the inquiry is important for the future, for the why, but it's clear that this happened. I don't want to enter too much to Israel politics. I'm trying. I'm outside of politics, but yet it's clear to me that after this kind of dramatic event, Netanyahu cannot stay in power.
And certainly, I think, is the view of most of the Israeli public, it seems, judging by the opinion polls.
By the way, I was Netanyahu's political opponent for many years. I ran against him for office in elections. I even got a popular vote, but he formed the government. But but this is something which is cannot be denied. It's not a matter of different opinions, of different visions, or different policies. And Netanyahu tries to focus on what happened exactly during the night between October 6th and October 7th, but this is not the real question. And you mentioned this as well. The right policy, as I supported, was to act against Hamas, against the extremists, and to work with the more pragmatics in the region. And he did exactly the opposite. And by the way, he continues. And if I can elaborate a bit, and speaking also about the conclusions and what's happening also in the Israeli society. In a way, what Netanyahu is doing now is he continues to do the same, because when he says that Hamas and the PA is the same, this is what he did before. Now, most of the Israelis would say the mistake was to finance terror and to give them the money, to give Hamas the money, okay? This is just one side of the equation. The other side was to weaken the pragmatics. And he continues in doing it. So it really, well, it's clear that he understands, but it serves his political, interest. And it's pity that part of the conclusions that people are saying, okay, the army failed in guarding, in securing the border. So what's the outcome? So we don't need to have borders, or we faced the price that civilians have paid for this situation, and those that are suggesting it's minority to rebuild settlements in Gaza. So what's the idea? It's like somebody that, his neighbors entered to his home, the alarm didn't work, and they killed some of his family, raped, and then his conclusion, okay, I don't need an alarm, and I will send my family to live with these guys. Part of what's happening now, because of the dramatic events, is that there are those that are trying to turn it into the wrong conclusions. And it's quite easy to do it today when everything is so sensitive and other resources. So it will take time also to have this debate, as we should in Israel.
So I'm sure if Netanyahu were here, he would make the claim that the original mistake was that it withdrawal from Gaza in the first place, the disengagement from Gaza.
Let's speak about it.
And others have argued, we've had a question that's come in that what was problematic there, and you were involved in this decision, was to not coordinate it with the Palestinian Authority. That ultimately allowed Hamas to claim that their resistance was what was responsible for Israel's disengagement, that led to Hamas's victory in the Palestinian elections and ultimately to the takeover. And so, from both sides, there's the claim that they shouldn't have withdrawn in the first place.
I would like to answer that, because from right wing, the next day they said, okay, they blame Oslo, they blame the disengagement. So firstly, I can criticize some things in Oslo, but the idea of separating the land and is something that I continue to support. And frankly, it was not really implemented during all these years. So this is one answer. But the answer on the disengagement is that exactly what I've just told you. I mean, before that, Israeli civilians lived within Gaza. The idea that civilians are giving security instead of the army is wrong. The whole idea of countries and states is that the army gives security to civilians. So I think that we need to speak truth. And the truth is that those that want to rebuild settlements in Gaza, they want it because of their ideology of greater Israel. It's not connected to Israeli security. But you've asked rightly, okay, but maybe, and there are those saying, look, when we leave territories, they are being occupied by terror. Unfortunately, this is the truth, but I don't think that Israel's security is based on occupying militarily the places where we face threats from. Because if this is the situation, we didn't speak until now about Lebanon or Iran, which is orchestrating all these horrors in the region, including the Houthi in Yemen. So security is more than just holding these places. I agree that it's a legitimate question about the disengagement, about doing it with the Palestinians. At the time, I was just before the disengagement in Washington, and I met one of the Palestinian leaders, and he told me, cooperate with us. And I came back to Arik Sharon, and he said, I don't want to. And I didn't understand it at the time. And I thought that it was a mistake, but as a minister, I mean, you need to choose whether to support or not. And what I said is that since we are doing it unilaterally, I cannot support it unless we will get from the United States, they will get a message to Palestinians that Israel is withdrawing, but yet they are losing some of their positions. And therefore, Sharon agreed that I will come to travel to Condi Rice, and I convinced her that to give what is called Bush letter to Israel, saying that the establishment of the Palestinian state is the answer to the Palestinian refugees, because, as I said before, they are being held as political cards for something that will never happen in the future. Israel is not an option for them. And this is against the concept of two states for two peoples. Each state gives an answer to national aspiration of different peoples. So Israel is not part of this to the Palestinians. And, but now I think that, yes, militarily, maybe we could have acted before or differently, but after negotiating with the Palestinians, I think that when they need to choose between getting not 100%, they prefer to get the zero. And this could enter into negotiations forever. And in a way, Arik Sharon implemented it in a year. Unbelievable. And therefore, I think that the idea to take our civilians from Gaza was the right thing to do. And the question is just a pure security question, not part of ideology of the settlers that want to rebuild the settlements in Gaza.
You mentioned the previous peace negotiations that you took part in, and President Abbas's not accepting the proposals that Prime Minister Olmert made in 2008. Olmert has since said that, you know, I think he's claimed that they were that close to reaching an agreement, and had it not been maybe for Operation Cast Lead, for the Gaza war that broke out, that would have been possible. Do you agree that that was that close, that President Abbas was willing? I mean, you know, now there's this big question as to whether there was ever a real chance to begin with, but, you know, you were there. Did you get a sense that it could have been an agreement could have been reached, or it was just a question of bad timing and various events that scuttled that?
You know, I've asked myself the same question, because the reason for me to join politics is to try and solve this conflict. So instead of just asking myself these questions, I decided in 2013 to join Netanyahu's government with only one condition, that I will renegotiate peace with Abu Mazen. So you refer to 2008, but in 2013, 2014, there was an American paper that was quite similar to what Olmert offered or Clinton in 2000. And again, on March 17, 2014, there was a meeting at the White House with Obama and Abu Mazen, and again, he didn't give an answer. So assuming that it was that close, so he had different opportunities to say, okay, I accept this offer and put Israel in a dilemma, but he didn't do it. So I truly don't want to enter into a blame game, because at the end of the day, it's the Israeli interest to try and find a way to move forward. But I would not take the blame on Israel in this case. And, speaking about whether we were close, sometimes it's like magnets, when at first it goes smooth, and then toward the end, you discover that maybe it's close, but you cannot connect, or it's very deep, because it's about very sensitive issues. And there's a need of leadership that will take, on both sides, by the way, that will take historical decisions. And
I want to ask, you mentioned, I don't want to play the blame game either, but many people are wondering, when we think about the responsibility for the continuation of the conflict, clearly, there's enough blame to go around, but where do you think, as an Israeli leader, that Israel could have done more or done things differently? Is there any, to what responsibility would you attribute to Israel as opposed to the Palestinians? I mean, clearly, President Abbas.
I am not going to. I'm not going to play this game.
Fair enough. Okay, let me ask you about.
No, I mean, it is so complicated. We have, and I don't even to make this comparison. We have terror coming from the Palestinians. We have their. I said that I don't want to answer, and then I'm doing it. And also on the Israeli side, we have those that don't want to reach an understanding because they believe, as I said before, in Greater Israel. So they build more settlements. It is really not important. Speaking about the past, you're asking me about the past. I want to share with you my first meeting with the Palestinian negotiator at the time in 2007, 2008, the negotiations. And I start to speak about rights of the Jewish people, and he start to speak about the rights of the Palestinians, and I started from the Bible, and he told me that. Trust me, it was very interesting, but useless. And after hours of discussion, we said, okay, this is not important. Each side can keep his own narrative, but we decide, and we will write it in the agreement. The decision about whose narrative is more just, this would not be the decision, but how we make a better future. And this is my answer to you as well. I'm focused, or I was focused for many years in the way out of this. And both sides bear some responsibility, but it is very complicated. It's not just one decision, one action that we turn it.
So I want to move, talking about the present and the war. You were involved in the, in many ways, the first of a series of wars between Israel and Hamas, the war that took place between December 2008 and January 2009, that Israelis refer to as Operation Cast Lead. During that conflict, around, I believe, 1,400 Palestinians were killed, and there were charges of war crimes made then against Israel and against you personally. And more recently, of course, as you mentioned in your opening presentation, Israel, the IDF is also being charged now, not only with war crimes, but even with the crime of genocide. You know, when you think about how Israel, the IDF, conducted these operations, do you think the claims made about the targeting, the decisions to targeting decisions, and whether the rules of engagement, has there been a shift in that regard? I mean, now Operation Cast Lead, 1,400 civilians killed. We're now looking at nearly 30,000. Do you see the way the IDF has conducted this war in particular is different in terms of the rules of engagement, the knock on the roof, the targeting decisions that has created this situation where, or has given rise to the situation where so many Palestinians
have... At first, I was, as you've mentioned, in the last operation in Gaza. I'm not in the Israeli cabinet now. Also, as a reference also to Israeli soldiers that were killed in other military operations and those that are being killed during this war, there is a change, because in the other operations, we didn't enter with boots on the ground, the ground maneuver into the cities in Gaza. So the casualties for Israel and for the Palestinians were completely different. But the need to eradicate Hamas, there is no other alternative. I mean, they are hiding among civilians. They are using all these places, including as you know now, as we all know now, hospitals and so on. So I want to share with you two examples that I experienced. One was during the operation in 2014. I was Minister of Justice, and I thought that a specific target is legitimate because I said the idea that Hamas is a regime and a terrorist organization, the meaning is that there are some places that we can target without the proof that there is specific terrorists there, okay? And I had a discussion with the Attorney General that didn't approve it. So, and this is what's happening today as well. But now it's a war in a different magnitude, in a very small place. And the soldiers, they are acting, you know that some of them are being also, I'm sure that you remember also the story of these hostages that tried to get out and were killed by. It's a very tense situation. And I think that it mostly, the reference is to the air bombs and not to the ground operation. I am sure, I'm not in the cabinet, but it's clear to me that it is being supervised and no Israeli pilot is targeting civilians directly because of the massacre. But I want to share another. I know that this is my story, and the others that would not believe me. But when I was in the parliament, I was the chairperson of a committee as part of the Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee. It was on legal legal lawfare or against all these files that were opened. And it was the time where some right wing said that the Israeli Supreme Court, by forcing the Israeli army to act in accordance to the international law, it makes it impossible or very difficult to fight terror. By the way, this was also some of their excuses during the judicial reforms, to support the judicial reforms. And we succeeded in keeping Israel democratic institutions and judicial institutions free and independent. So I called to the head of operations within the IDF, to the committee, and I said, I'm asking an open question. Feel free to answer whatever you believe in, because I want to understand better. Do you feel that you cannot operate what you want to do because of the Supreme Court, of the international law? And his answer was, maybe, but assuming that the international law does not apply, this is our values. So I trust that this is the way the Israeli army continue to act. And I know that the international community does not believe it, because I'm just coming from Munich Security Conference, and the Secretary General of the United Nations started by saying that there is no justification to the massacre of October 7th, and there is no justification to the collective punishment of Israel. And when the Chancellor of Germany was interviewed, the first question was about the right of Israel to defend itself. He supported it. And then the casual civilians among the Palestinians, he said human shields. And then the third question was whether he can prove that Israel is acting in accordance to the international law. I'm a lawyer. Usually you need to prove that somebody is violating the law. So it's an unbelievable situation. As I said before, I think that it's legitimate to ask, but it is clear also that Israel is supervising and judging those that are violating the law. The most unbelievable situation is that democracy, Israel is part of the free world. We want to be part of the free world. We signed all these conventions after the Second World War because it was clear to us that in case of atrocities or somebody that is acting against civilians, they need to be judged. So we are within this democracy being criticized while these terrorists are completely free. And the families of the hostages went, and rightly so, to the ICC and said, prosecute them. Now you don't need to look for Sinwar in the tunnels. You can prosecute all these that are sitting in Qatar and negotiating the life of the refugees. I think that the free world, in an understanding that what we are facing is something that the entire free world is facing in different parts, need to understand that to prosecute these terrorists is the most important thing. And then it will give hope also to the people in Gaza, because otherwise, if Hamas remain, they will have another round, as we will have another round. We tried everything.
So the other criticism which has come in about the war and the conduct, not focused specifically on the use of force, but rather the issue of humanitarian aid. And do you think, from the outset, the decision was made initially to impose a complete blockade of goods going into, of humanitarian aid going into Gaza, which seemed to very quickly turn international opinion. And one of the criticisms, even from the Biden administration, which has stood by Israel throughout, has been the difficulties. I mean, there is whatever a humanitarian.
I want to make it clear. It is unfair because we have hostages that are being held by Hamas without any humanitarian answer and no Red Cross visits. After saying that, Israel must, in accordance to the international law, to enable the transfer of humanitarian goods. That's it. And this is what we should do.
I want to talk about the goal of destroying Hamas, because we've had some questions about that, and you've stated very strongly the need understandable need for Israelis to see Hamas removed from power and to see Hamas as...
Not only for Israelis, not only for Israelis. If there is any hope for the people in Gaza, is without Hamas. If there is any hope in the international community for peace, is without Hamas. It's not just an Israeli-Hamas issue.
So the question that's come in is, let's assume that every Hamas fighter is killed, that Sinwar is either killed or captured, and is it realistic to to imagine that Hamas won't somehow reconstitute itself? I mean, is the goal of destroying Hamas, given the fact that, there is something like a third of Palestinians support Hamas, that this ideology that it represents is embedded in Palestinian politics, is it realistic?
That's why, okay, excuse me for interrupting.
No.
That's why I believe that there's a need to replace them as a regime, because just acting militarily without today agreeing on the replacement, they will come back. This is one thing. Secondly, you said that they were elected. As I said before, I think that this is also an opportunity to make it clear that any Palestinian government that will include these Hamas or Hamas as a regime without accepting these requirements of renounced violence and terrorism will not be legitimate, and the international community will not support all the reconstructions and everything. It can be an opportunity to do so. And thirdly, yes, I hear the things that, yes, it's ideology. So what? Nazism was an ideology. Does it mean that the free world should not have act and defeat them? It's a very horrifying, not legitimate ideology. And in the long run, it's also a matter of education and so on. But as I said, there are certain things that we can do now, and there are certain things that hopefully will change in the future. So, but I cannot say, oh, it's ideology, and therefore let's keep them there.
So on the question of, what comes next, Prime Minister Netanyahu just released, after months of waiting, his, position paper, I suppose is what it is, on the day after, talking about what he envisages for at least the medium term in the Gaza Strip, that the need for Israel to maintain essentially security control over the Gaza Strip, buffer zone in the Gaza Strip. And he did not name the Palestinian Authority as having any role in governing the Gaza Strip. What's your view as to this big, question of the day after? Do you think the Biden administration, the Israel should support the Biden administration's approach, which is to bring about a kind of revitalized and reformed Palestinian Authority to eventually take over, or the idea that's Prime Minister Netanyahu has presented to have some non-PA technocratic...
You know that I completely oppose Netanyahu's policies before October 7th and after October 7th. I think that Israel cannot afford to be in a situation that the Israeli government cannot decide about the day after, when the day after is here and now. I would, since I'm not familiar with all the parameters of Biden's administration's plan, I would say in general that the idea of normalization with Saudis and a vision plus steps toward two states for two peoples, it served the Israeli interest according to my vision for Israel. And as I said before, I think that it already showed that to say that Hamas and the PA, it's the same, apparently, in a way, we are in a situation where it exploded in our face. And therefore, the only lenses that I would look at the plan when it will be on the table, it will be Israel's security. If it brings security, if it gives us legitimacy to continue and act against terror, portray demilitarization as a future goal supported by the international community. Yes, of course.
Would that include the potential unilateral recognition of Palestinian statehood that's being?
No, it's not.
Discussed?
No, I do not forget it. I don't want all of us to forget the hostages that need to be released. Netanyahu is saying no to a unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state without negotiations, but yet he is not willing to negotiate. And this is the price that we are paying internationally when he's not willing to negotiate, because if I had been in power and negotiating, nobody would have suggested to do it unilaterally. But why I said that it's not a good idea. Listen, a Palestinian state was not existing before. It's a new thing that needs to be established. State and comes with some rights. For example, army. The Palestinians already agreed that the future state will be demilitarized. So, and this is crucial for Israel's security and for the security of the entire region, because we don't want a terrorist organization to take over tanks and aircrafts and so on. So it cannot be just saying, okay, you've got your state. Secondly, I'll give you an example from my panel in Munich Security Conference. The Palestinian Prime Minister was there, and he said that all they want is Palestinian state, 67 borders. Okay. And then came the Spanish Foreign Minister, and he said, I support this demand of unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state that includes Gaza, the West Bank, and the corridor that connects them. And I was there, and they say, oops. And he said, what happened? And I said, I just want to show you the complexity of things. Because Shtaria, he resigned, but at the time he was Palestinian Prime Minister, he wants 67 line. In 67, Gaza and the West Bank were not connected. You are speaking about a connection. So this is something that needs to be negotiated. And it depends on Israel's willingness to do something with it. And therefore, it's more complicated than just, statements here, statements there. And therefore, I do not support these unilateral steps by the international community, but I do understand that for Israel, Israel doesn't need a leader who knows how to say no to the international community, but a leader who knows how to recruit the international community to Israeli interests. And this is missing.
There is, I think, as you probably gathered, no doubt, at the Munich Security Conference, a kind of a new sense of urgency in the international community toward resolving the conflict, a feeling that, just as Israelis feel things can't go back to October the 6th, there's a feeling, I think, that's widely held that this conflict needs to be resolved, that this kind of pattern of constant escalations of violence, of conflict, has to end. And that's what's kind of driving this, consideration of recognition of state. But there's also, I think, a widely held sense that the two-state solution is on its deathbed, if it hasn't already died, and that if it doesn't, if it's not achieved in the near future, it will be too late, because there'll be too many Israeli settlements and too many Israeli settlers. The Israeli public and the Israeli political situation as it stands today, and that, I'm sure you've seen the polls that show that most Israelis today don't support a two-state solution. So what hope is there, given where the Israeli public opinion is and the opposition to a two-state solution, and the continued expansion of settlements and settler population in the West Bank?
I'm against it, by the way.
You've been against it. So, and you've been, one of the strongest voices in Israel calling for a two-state solution and representing. But that position in Israeli politics seems to be harder and harder to gain public support. So how do you think you can save this solution, which you've argued many times is necessary for Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state, given the trends as you see them?
I want to make it clear that, my vision is not two states for two peoples. My vision is Israel as a Jewish democratic secure state. The only solution that I think that gives an answer to us and to the Palestinians as well is two states for two peoples, as long as this is the end of conflict and according to our security parameters. Assuming that this does not exist as a solution, if somebody, by the way, has another idea, we can open it. Another idea, how to keep Israel as a Jewish democratic secure state and to give an answer to the Palestinian aspiration. So give it to me. And I am worried, not because the international community supports the idea of two states for two peoples. I'm afraid that what we are hearing now is from the river to the sea, one state, the worst case scenario, Palestinian state. I listened to the voices that changed also in the US. Now, the discussion is not about national rights, but about individual rights, the meaning voting rights to Palestinians also to one state. So we are in a slippery slope toward one state. And white state will be with an ongoing conflict within this state. This is even worse than stating the vision of two states for two peoples and implementation in stages, because nobody in the international community serious enough think that this will happen the next day. Speaking about Israelis, I agree with you. I live in Israel. I wish I can convince Israelis, as I said before, that it's not about the Palestinians. It's not about what we give to the Palestinians, but what we get. I'm a Zionist. This is why I'm fighting. This is why I was in the streets for Israel democracy. And this is why I believe that in order to keep Israel as a democracy, we need a Jewish majority and to separate ourselves from the Palestinians. I would never ignore Israel's security needs, and this needs to be discussed. But we need to put aside those that are speaking in terms of security, but yet trying to promote the ideology of Greater Israel. And this is the real debate that we need the real discussion that we need to do in Israel. It's a very important, but also very difficult challenges, especially these days.
I'm wondering, this is a more personal question, since you when you entered politics in the 1990s as a member of the Likud party, and as an opponent of the Oslo peace process, and as a supporter of the idea of Greater Israel, and over your political career changed quite dramatically. How do you understand that evolution? I mean, was it what brought that about in you? Prime Minister Netanyahu has not made that evolution. Others have, like Ehud Olmert as well, similar trajectory. Where did that come from, do you think?
I think that whatever, I didn't change dramatically my positions. I joined Israel politics because I didn't want to join politics. It was not my dream. I was a lawyer by profession, maybe better lawyer than politician. And it was 1995, just before, a few weeks before the assassination of Rabin. And in Israel, there were two camps. One called himself the Camp of Land of Israel, we shouldn't give them even an inch, and the other was the camp of peace, thinking that the new Middle East will fall on our shoulders. And I said, okay, my voice is not being heard. And my voice said, at the time when I joined politics, is yes, as the Jewish people has the right on the entire land, but yet we need to divide the land, but we need to do it in a different manner than this memorandum of understanding that postponed the core issues to the future. And this was my criticism of Oslo. And this was the reason for me to join politics. I looked at my children that were 8 and 5 at the time. And now the young one that was 5 at the time just came back after 4 months in Gaza to his 13 months baby. And I thought, okay, this is my role. This is what I need to do. And you mentioned Olmert and also others from Likud like Dan Meridor. What connects us is Jabotinsky. We grew up believing not only on the rights of the Jewish people on the entire land, but also in equal rights to minorities within this tiny place. And the only way to achieve both is by giving up part of the land. And so it's not that huge change. You can find those believing in both nation state for Jewish people and equal rights to its citizens. When you think how to keep this is the only solution.
So let's say you didn't change, but the Likud party definitely has changed.
Oh yeah, partially because we left.
That's what I wanted to ask. Do you think, I mean, what accounts, it's a very different party than the party it was in the 1990s. Is that, in your view, and maybe this is too political or personal, is that because of Netanyahu? Has he kind of transformed the party in his own image in some ways? Or is it more as a product of the kind of change of the Israeli electorate in more religious, more right-wing, and that the Likud is responding to this grassroots shift? Or is it much more, like Trump and the Republican Party maybe, and Netanyahu and Likud?
Well, I think that for that we should have another webinar, but I'll try to do it shortly. Likud changed partially because, as you know, a group of Likudniks led by Arik Sharon and myself and others, and Olmert and others, we left Likud because the Likud was a no-no party. Like I remember the day where they said that the committee, the central committee of the party will announce no to a Palestinian state. It was clear that we cannot stay there. So the moderates left and we formed a Kadima that later I led this party. So basically Likud, when it comes to the conflict or to ideology, those that were more to the right stay there. The problem now with Likud is not about ideology. It is a combination of different things that happen to Israel politics, including populism, corruption, and other things that hopefully will be changed. But it's more complicated than that, but yes, Bibi is responsible to this as well.
That brings me to the final question that a few people have asked about the prospects for political change in Israel, and there's widespread public anger over there was widespread public anger over the judicial overhaul that was attempted. There's opinion polls show that Prime Minister Netanyahu is widely unpopular. There's even, in the middle of a war, demands for an election. How do you see things playing out? I mean, what is the prospect for a different government to come into power in Israel? Given the politics of the situation today, you hopeful that there'll be a different government? And how might that come about? Because it doesn't seem that the present government is likely to dissolve itself anytime soon.
Okay, I'm not a political commentator. I just want to say that during the 9 months before October 7th, a new company in Israel was born, believing in democracy, fighting for democracy. It changed the discussion from only Bibi or anybody but Bibi to something with substance. And I was very happy and very optimistic to see this happening. You know, I spoke up on every stage. I think that I was there since the first demonstration, and it gave me hope, because for me it's also clear that they will also understand that the conflict infiltrates into Israel, and there's a need also to solve it, even though 5 rounds of elections, nobody was willing to speak about the conflict because it portrays you as left wing. So I'm not a political commentator. I just can share my hope that we have elections in Israel soon, and different government will enter into power.
Okay, well, I think that seems like an appropriate note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I want to thank all of our audience members as well. I also want to remind everybody that this will be available on the center's website, as well as on a YouTube channel later. So you're welcome to share the event. Thank you again, Ms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Together we stand, together we win.
Thank you, and goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.